Hey, it's Jeff Zito, and thanks for checking out another episode of the Celebrity Jobber Podcast, number 1 on the Apple Podcast Music Interviews chart. Thank you so much for that. You can listen via Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeart, wherever you stream your podcasts. Or you can go back and check out past guests and episodes online at celebrityjobber.com. And please don't forget to subscribe. We'd love a 5-star rating and, of course, leave a review. We're pretty much taking a look at these celebrities before fame and what life was all about, what direction they were headed in, you know, maybe their big break in life. And I'm really excited to get into this episode because my next guest is actually someone who I've kind of known for 25 years. Well, let's back up and say we've kind of known of each other, but we don't know each other. I did a radio show in his hometown of Port Charlotte, Florida. It was Zito and Garrett on WJBX 99X in Fort Myers. Pretty much right down the road. Regardless, over the years, we may have bumped into each other once or twice. We have some mutual friends. And I do know his dad. In the mid-90s, when the punk scene exploded, Chris DeMakes and his band were right there in the thick of it. His band Less Than Jake has an upcoming European tour. On Instagram at Less Than Jake or Less Than Chris D. And I just so happen to be a fan of Chris's podcast, which is called Chris DeMakes a Podcast. And he talks to artists about particular songs and why they wrote them, what they wrote them about, and I really, really love it, so I hope you check it out. And for the podcast, on Instagram, at Chris DeMakes a Podcast. Chris DeMakes from Less Than Jake is my guest this week on Celebrity Jobber.
The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, give a 5-star rating, and leave a review. Check out all our past episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you pod. What if these celebrities weren't famous? What would they have become? What was their first job? We're about to find out.
Chris, how are you?
I'm good. Is this Jeff?
This is me.
How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. You know, it's funny. I really appreciate you doing this for me. And I know, we've known of each other for a while, but we've never really had a conversation. We've got mutual friends and been, in the business for a while, but we've never had the opportunity to have a chat. We met, I think we met, one time a long time ago, but
yeah, I want to say you came to a Less Than Jake show in Fort Myers, but does that sound right?
Yep, sure does. It sure does.
Okay.
And what's even funnier than that was, back in the in the late 90s when I first got to Fort Myers to WJBX, we had a morning show, Zito and Garrett it was called, and
right.
Port Charlotte, far away from him for 35 minutes from Fort Myers, but back in the olden days, which I call the late 90s, whenever we came to Port Charlotte, it was like the circus was coming to town. Like, it was crazy. Like, people wanted to come out and hang with us. And I remember meeting your dad very early on. And I know he was involved with, listening to us. And it was just he was a really cool guy. And he told me all about his son. And he was really proud back then. And I'm sure he is still now. How is he doing?
My dad passed away 3 years ago.
Oh man, I'm so sorry to hear that. Well, I'm so sorry to hear that. He was a really, really cool guy. He lived 10 lifetimes. So yeah, he was a really fun guy, man, and actually came to a lot of our station events when we were in Port Charlotte, and was very easy to talk to and approachable. And really sorry to hear that, man, because he was a really good guy, and that's what I remember most, about those early days. And
he was our biggest cheerleader. It's funny you mentioned him because I'm going to talk about him when we get into the jobs. So.
Oh, right on. Awesome, dude. Well, so Chris, let's first of all, I'm a real big fan of your podcast, and you've been doing it for a while now. You've got great guests. and a catchy little theme song. I hope to maybe convince you to do one of those for me one day. But when did
I would love to.
Oh man, I would love that. You have no idea how long you've been doing the podcast for a long time. How'd you get started with it?
Yeah, it's been about 5.5 years. Just prior to COVID, I had started a songwriting business, and I was doing jingles for businesses, and I was writing custom songs for fans, like if it was your birthday or anniversary, or if you wanted to get a song for a loved one, or I wrote songs for people that hated their boss, you name it. I was writing all kinds of songs. And I wanted to put together some kind of promotional video, and I had seen this animated video a buddy of mine did, and he plays in this band called Punchline, and one thing led to another over the course of this week of putting the video together, and he just kept hammering me about, you should do a podcast. You should do a podcast. And this is about 4 months into COVID, where it seemed like every lead singer of a band was doing a podcast because there was nothing else to do. And I was like, oh man, I don't want to be that guy. And he's like, no, it'll be songwriting specific. You'll pick one artist who has an iconic song, their most iconic song of their career, and you'll break it down top to bottom with the artist. You'll get the story. It'll be documented. It'll be like a song Wikipedia. It'll feed back into your songwriting. It'll feed back into your band. There'll be no governor on you, so to speak, meaning like Instagram and Facebook, they throttle you. They want you to throw money at your ads.
Yes.
Like, if 4,000 people are listening to your podcast that day, all 4,000 of them are going to know about the new Less Than Jake record, or the Less Than Jake's playing Fort Myers tonight.
Right.
And I slept on it. I woke up the next morning and I was sold. And June 1st of 2020 was our first episode. We release a brand new one every Monday. We have not missed a Monday in 5.5 years.
I mean, it almost seems like you do more than that. You're just once a week or sometimes twice a week, right?
Yeah. So the main feed's once a week. On Thursday, we do a Throwback Thursday where we dust off an older episode, and we'll do new notes at the top. And it kind of a lot of times it'll send the base or the people that listen to us. It'll they'll look at that and go, "Ooh, I missed that episode," because we're hovering around 300 episodes now. So we do that, and then we got a couple other little chestnuts that we put in there. We sprinkle in during the year. We do this game show segment called Defeat DeMakes, where people that are part of our Patreon, we randomly select a person that can come on and they can challenge me to rock and roll trivia.
Okay.
And we've done a couple of those episodes that we throw out. So it's been a lot of fun. I again never fashioned myself a podcast host. Prior to doing this podcast, I don't think I ever listened to a podcast all the way through. I'd always find the sweet spot. Someone would say, in blabbermouth or something, I'll go to the 34-minute mark.
Right,
That's when he starts talking about this. So,
well, Chris,
I
gotta say though, man, I think now podcasting has changed quite a bit over the course of, not only the last 5 years, but, I remember getting back into it like 15 years ago and really going nowhere, just kind of begging, singing for your supper, having people send you money. And it really it wasn't as evolved as it is today. And what I like most about it is, it's not, don't think of it as being that guy. It's very interesting for people to, that they admire, they listen to, maybe they're a fan of their music, or maybe you're just a regular person. It's really interesting to listen to other people's thoughts and original ideas. And your thought and original idea about the songwriting, one of my favorite episodes of Chris DeMakes a podcast is Mark Hoppus. I thought that was so great. And very, very interesting, how you were like, where were you, when you first heard the song? Where were you when you wrote the song? I was very impressed by the whole thing. So I hope you're proud of this work, because I think it's really, really good.
Oh yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Okay, minus the Joe Rogans and the Mark Marons of the world. There's podcasting is not huge money. That's not why I do it. It is a passion project at this point. Everything feeds back into it. I can go on there and I can say, hey, I got this Less Than Jake tour coming up. I can have that embedded at the top of my podcast. I can have it embedded again in the middle, so my listeners are knowing what's going on with me. And it gets me out of bed too when I'm off the road. It gives me a reason every day, whether I'm lazy or not. Okay, I took the kids to school. Do I have other work to do? No, but hey, I always got stuff with the podcast.
Right.
So it's great.
Right. It's almost like it forces you to take a shower. Which is good, No,
it does. For a long time, I wasn't honing my craft when I was home. I'd be like, okay, I just got off the road. And the reason for that was we used to tour like maniacs, and we still do to a degree, but we're not out for more than 2.5, 3 weeks at a time. And then we're back home because we're all older. We have families and whatnot,
sure.
But, it's a good spot to be in. It's awesome.
The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito. The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito.
So tell me, let's rewind all the way back here. Growing up in Port Charlotte, you're in high school. Was it Charlotte High School or was it Port Charlotte?
Yeah, I went to Port Charlotte. So I was over the river in Port Charlotte. Charlotte's over in Punta Gorda.
Right.
So
okay.
I lived 0.7 miles from the high school. So it was right up the road, and I wasn't even 16 when I got my first job.
Really?
How old
were you when you got your first job?
Well, that's the thing. So I was 15. I was like maybe 2 or 3 months shy of my 16th birthday. And my friend Glenn told me, he said, hey, I'm washing dishes at the Chinese restaurant. You don't have to be 16. You just have to be 15. I'm like, okay. So I got to go down there. And I kind of was tiptoeing around my father at this point.
Right.
He's like, what's this job all about? It's fine. It's fine. So I get dropped off there, and the owner tells me, he says, and the owner's name was Sam. The place was called China Fair. right there on US 41 in Port Charlotte. And
right.
He told me, he said, you have to train for 3 days. You do not get paid. Well, I'm 15 years old, and I'm like, okay, you got to train for a job. Why would he pay me to train?
Right.
And I wash dishes that night, and I go home, and I'm filthy. I remember just stinking to high heaven. And my dad's saying, so what's going on with work? And he starts pressing me for questions, and I'm doing the dance because I know he's not going to be happy with the answer. And I told him that, I work for free. For free? What are you talking about? He marched my rear end out to the car. Get in the car. And we barrel down there. And I've never seen my father this angry. To this day,
God.
I mean, he let loose on this guy. I was scared, and I was like shaking, and he's just like, you're going to pay my son. You're going to pay him right now.
So your dad,
out of the register.
Your dad gets pissed off when he finds out that you're training / working for free. Gets you back in the car. He drives down to the Chinese restaurant. What is going through? Like, you're in the parking lot now of the Chinese restaurant, and your dad's about to go inside and rip Sam a new asshole. So what's your feeling inside? Right? Do you have that lump in your throat or in your stomach when like you're having girl trouble, or like what was your feeling?
Yeah, it's all that. I'm a complete stress ball. I actually had a pretty decent night because I had never done anything like that before. So it was kind of interesting. I'm working with a dude that I went to high school with. At some point, at the end of the night, I'll never forget, he takes out his wallet, and it was one of those Velcro wallets because it was pretty busy that night. And it's just clear as a bell, and he takes out a $5 bill. Now, a $5 bill back in 1989 was a decent chunk of change. I mean, you could go to the movie for like $3.50 and have enough left over for something.
Right.
So $5, I was in heaven. And now my dad's barreling down South 41, hauling ass back to the China Fair, and and I don't know what he's gonna do, but when he goes in, he just lights a concussive bomb off.
Oh my God.
Yeah, he's letting loose. There's still people in the joint. And he's like, "You're gonna pay now." And like, the dude went in the register and like gave me like, I don't know what it was, like $9 or $10.
Right.
For I think minimum wage was like $3 back then. And,
so
and
Chris,
that was it.
How was the very next time that you went to work? Tell me how nervous you were to go to work the next time after this situation.
Oh, well, first of all, let's make something clear. I did not go back to China Fair. That was
one and done.
That was rung up. There's no way I'm going back there. I mean, I don't even know if I would have went back there if my dad would have let me. I would have been afraid, like the guy's going to kill me or something.
Oh,
so,
my God.
No, I got a job literally, I don't know, 200 or 300 yards from there. There was an Italian place that I ended up getting a job washing dishes, and I did that for a number of years. But yeah, that was my first experience with a job. And my dad could talk a big game. Like he used to, if my brother and I pissed him off enough, he could raise hell and get pretty pissed. He wasn't violent. He never hit us. But someone messed with his children, and I saw Papa Bear in action, and it scared the hell out of me.
Oh my God, I bet it did. So this was back in the late '80s in Port Charlotte. Tell me a little bit about the band and when you first started playing music.
Yeah, so I knew our drummer, Vinny, who stepped down from the band in 2018, but he was our original drummer, lyricist, and him and I knew each other from Port Charlotte. And we went to high school. He was a couple years older than me. I graduated in 91, and I went off to the University of Florida. And the interesting part was Vinny was going to school at Manatee Community College, and he ended up getting his associate degree. And he, at that point, could have went to any university he wanted to. And lo and behold, the woman he was with, who ended up being his first wife, she pretty much could have told him she wanted to go anywhere, and I think he would have followed. Right. But lo and behold, she got accepted up in Gainesville, and a year later he moved up there. And this whole time, him and I were kind of sending cassettes back in the mail, because that's what you did in 1991.
Sure did.
And he moved up, like I said, about a year after I got there, and that's where we met the rest of the band, and here we are today. I don't know how 1992 turned into 2025. I literally blinked my eyes, and here we are.
I know it's pretty crazy, and it's just so many things have changed. I think for us being, around the same age, so much has happened. Back in 1992, there was no internet, and there was, but I mean, it was the internet back in 1992 was in its very infinite stages, and there's so many differences. And I would imagine when you're in the music business, I mean, there were because of the lack of the internet back in 1992, there were some great things that happened to you, and then probably also some not so great things because of technology, as far as the music business as a whole changing.
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, well, it's kind of the same with radio. You've been here for 25, 30 years, the radio's dead. The format's dead. Terrestrial radio's dead. And here we are.
And here we are.
You keep pivoting, man.
Yeah.
You keep pivoting.
You have to.
You jump to the next toadstool. And all the while you're doing that, you're careful not to jump trends or, we have all seen it. Sometimes you see that band and like the lead singer is, 50 and he's got that haircut or he's dressed like he's 14 and you're like, come on, man.
Right.
I mean, Alice Cooper and Nikki Sixx can pull it off, but there's some guys that just can't.
Right. They're one of one, no doubt.
The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito. Celebrity Jobber.
So it's in Gainesville. Less Than Jake actually starts. You knew Vinny kind of in high school, but really at the University of Florida is where things started to take shape. Can I say that the term big break? Was there a big break that happened to you while you were in Gainesville, or was it just like a series of things that happened before maybe, everything changed for you, and Less Than Jake isn't just a hobby or a garage band, it's a business, it's a real thing?
Yeah, that's a crazy question. I've been asked that before, and there's really no one way to frame it. Again, it was a series of small small little victories, small little explosions, one domino effect after another. You know, our shows in Gainesville were starting to get crazy, 93, 94. When I say crazy, you know, we were playing the punk club that could have comfortably held 100 people, but they were cramming 200, 300 people in this place. And we were constantly having a line around the place. We were starting to get fan mail from Daytona, Fort Lauderdale, Fort Myers.
Wow.
And, you know, we were starting to take weekend trips and trying to align ourselves with bands from those areas. And all the while, from 92 to 95, we were snail mailing people, calling different record labels that would have their numbers in the back, and we're connecting dots. So when we went out on our first U.S. tour in 1995, you know, we did, I want to say it was 48 shows in 51 days.
Woo.
Yeah, it was crazy. We were stuffed in a van going along, and yeah, you know, we had our duds. There was probably a dozen shows where there was no one there, but the bartender and the sound guy and you know, the local weirdo dancing on a Tuesday night. But for the most part, we had mapped it kind of. We did the way we did Florida. It's like, okay, we're playing Wisconsin. We're going to play with a band that has a draw there. Maybe we were on a compilation with this band. Cool. Maybe the other bands were on the comp will play. And now we're at a VFW hall on our first tour in Wisconsin, playing to, you know, 200 or 300 kids. So
wow.
we came home with $3,000 on that tour in 1995. No bands come home with money. We were hand screening our shirts after shows. We'd be in a parking lot or a rest stop. We had our ink back there. As long as there was a fountain, we could wash our screens out. I mean, it was hardcore. And I say it too, that I met the right people. This isn't cut out for everybody, you know, sleeping in the van, sketchy situations.
Yeah.
You know, I remember calling home back in the day. I'd be at some payphone and you'd look left and there'd be like a dope deal going on. You'd look to the right and it wasn't much better. And Dad'd be like, he'd always say at the end, you know, how's things out there? Everything's safe? Yeah. I'd say, yeah. And he'd always leave me with, all right, I love you. And he would say, hey, son. I'd say, yeah. And I knew what was coming. He'd say, no precarious positions. Which meant if it's sketchy, get the fuck out. And meanwhile, I'm looking over my shoulder going, it's about as sketchy as it can fucking get.
Oh, my God, dude. And you got to realize, I mean, you realize this, but maybe for some people listening that don't realize, you're talking 1993, 94, 95. Internet is very basic. You're finding out about Less Than Jake in Wisconsin, not by the internet, but by like fanzines and word of mouth. Fanzines, for people that don't know what those are, these local rags, these local magazines about local bands and the scene where, you know, whatever town you're talking about, this fanzine. And so I always find it so amazing how people, you know, how you got the word out. And people knew who Less Than Jake was back in 1995. I mean, I was talking to Robin Zander from Cheap Trick. He was telling me the story about going to Japan to record the Budokan album and how he thought like the president was there, but they were there to see him. And I was like, wow, it just blows my mind. That was 1978. You know, where there was zero, none of this stuff. So your situation's still very similar. The internet was nothing at the time, and you're going to Wisconsin.
And I trip out on that, Jeff. I really do. I'm like, I think about that, and then part of me goes, yeah, but people were just a little bit more savvy and resilient, and they had to figure it out.
Right.
You know, I joke about this. I'd love to do a reality show. It's a 2-week tour. It's a band. They're in a van, no GPS, no cell phones. Here's your map. Good luck.
Here's your triptych.
No, we're not even going to give them the old map quest you had to print out. Okay, you just get your ass in the van and you start going. I mean, and not to be like the old guy, like, oh, the kids today, but everything's at your disposal on this device. I think people had to think a little bit more, and they had to connect the dots themselves. And let's remember, back in the early 90s, you know, the what we're calling the punk community or the ska community, it just wasn't that big yet.
Right.
You know,
right.
Green Day and Blink and Offspring and all that stuff hadn't hit the airwaves or MTV just quite yet. And we were just on the cusp of that. So again, to your point earlier, it was just like these series of little things that happened. And after that first tour, we came home with the money. I don't even really remember the next tour after that because they just started bleeding into the next one.
I could tell you that when I first started working in Fort Myers, this is the late 90s. I remember there being a record rep in the office, and his name was Rick Austin. He worked for Capitol Records, and there was a Less Than Jake poster that we had in the studio, and he made reference to it and said, hey, you know, these guys are from right down the road. So this is when I first realized a little bit about Less Than Jake. This could have been 1998. I was familiar with the song I Think I Love You, the Partridge Family cover. Right. I think it was from a soundtrack, maybe like a huge movie soundtrack, was Scream 2. Is that true? Is that the...
That's absolutely true. And I got a funny story about David Cassidy with that whole thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
So again, it involves my dad. I took him to Vegas. I took him to Vegas in August of 1998. It was his 50th birthday, which trips me out because I'm 51
we're freaking
now.
50. Yeah, man, I know. It's crazy.
So, I thought my dad wasn't going to make it to 51. He's 50. Holy shit. So I take my dad to Vegas. On the way out, we flew out of Sarasota, and that's where Jerry Springer lived in Bradenton.
Yeah.
Jerry was on our flight to Vegas.
No way.
Which was just hilarious. Yeah. We're walking through first class, and my dad's got one of those fucking camcorders the size of like a cinder block.
Yeah.
And he's like filming fucking Jerry Springer. I'm like, are you for real?
You're embarrassed. So, you're wanting to crawl into a hole.
So we get out to Vegas. Now, this is my dad's 50th, but somehow, again, he was really vested in my career, and he loved every bit of it. Dad was a musician himself, so he was eating, breathing, and sleeping this. But he got in touch with someone from the marketing department at Capitol, and somehow, hey, David Cassidy was doing a residency. So my dad and I were walking into the MGM. He's like, where are we going? He's like, just don't worry about it. And we're going through, and he meets up with some dude, some security guard takes us back, and he introduces me to David Cassidy, who was one of the stars on the Partridge Family, who sang the song I Think I Love You that Less Than Jake covered for the Scream 2 soundtrack. Now, I didn't give a fuck who David Cassidy was. Right. I knew who he was.
Right.
But at this point, David Cassidy was 43. Okay.
Right.
Again, he was a dinosaur to me. And I remember him. I now know why he had the look on his face, because I've had this look before when you got the fan in front of you that really doesn't want to meet you, like someone else is with him that's excited for you to meet him.
Right.
You're like looking at you like with, like a smacked ass, like the dog with the head sideways. Right. You're like,
I don't really care, but this person does, that guy. Yeah.
Yeah, but he was just kind of like, oh, yeah, you're the band that did the cover. Yeah, cool. Like, get the fuck out of my dressing room. Right. That was the vibe I was getting.
Oh, God.
And so, anyways, yeah, my dad, David Cassidy, that took a crazy right turn. But anyway.
That's okay, though. That's what I think that's the best part about these, they take right turns, and sometimes, those right turns take you to a place you weren't expecting, and it's, it's great. I know exactly what you're talking about, that feeling of when somebody comes up to you and you think like, oh, hey, I gotta go meet this person, and they're like, hey, man, I really don't know who you are, or listen, or, I don't, but, it's like, wow, what an awkward moment. It's like, thanks, or sorry, like, you don't know what to say. Like, oh, Jesus.
Yeah, we call that the German compliment. And then
I like that. I know about the French exit. This is the German compliment. Okay.
Yeah. So I've gotten off stage before, 60,000 people at some festival, sweating my ass off. The crowd went nuts. We just killed it. And there'll be a fan. He'll even be in a Less Than Jake shirt. He'll have the records he wants you to sign. And the first thing out of the fan's mouth is he's like, "Hello, Chris. Can you sign my record, Jake? I just want to tell you that you were good today, but you were better the last time I saw you at Highfield Festival."
Like no filter.
Yeah. So you're sitting there scratching your head going, how do you take that?
Oh, my God. You're at the University of Florida. Is there any chance in your, back when you're in the moment, back in, the early 90s, and you're a Gator, you're going to frat parties and you're, doing beer pong, you're being regular college. Is there any possible way in your mind that you're thinking what you're doing with the band is going to ultimately turn into a career?
No, I remember quitting college. I dropped out of UF, and my parents and some close family members, they all said the same thing. They're like, well, what's your backup plan?
Right.
Like with the band. And I remember just looking at them like, there's no plan for tomorrow.
Right.
Like,
You're a kid.
I'm still a kid, and the adventure, the one thing that saved me in my head, because I was scared in the sense that, like, at that age, at least, I didn't want to let my parents down. We were really close, and they wanted the best for me, and they provided, and they worked hard for my brother and I. But, there was cases of beer being offered at backyard parties for people to hear my band play. Right. And, there might be some girls there, and there might be some other bands, and this is great. And I'm in Gainesville. There's a record store on every corner. There's a bunch of different venues. There's international, there's national, there's local bands playing all the time. I was a kid in a candy store.
The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito. Celebrity Jobber.
What was your major? What were you thinking about? I know maybe you were just in the moment and you weren't thinking quote unquote backup plan, but did you go with a specific major in mind?
I did. I went with the one that didn't had the least amount of math, which was telecommunications. Like a liberal arts degree.
Here we are, and here's why we're talking. How about that? It's known as the easiest major, is what they tell you. Like, hey, just FYI. I think it's one of the most unfair questions, by the way, to ask an 18-year-old kid. Hey, what do you want to major in? Which means, what do you want to study so you can, because you're going to do this job for the rest of your life. It's such an unfair question because, I don't know what I want to do with my life today, but, regardless, I'm 18 years old, and I also went to MCC, Manatee Community College, like Vinny, like you mentioned earlier. But, but I do remember just like, I don't know what I want to do. Oh, well, communications is the easiest. And it's like, okay, let's do that. And, and I guess it's kind of funny. You took communications. I took communications. It's the easiest. But, here we are in a communications business, kind of.
Well, I wasn't going to be a nuclear physicist. I knew that at a very young age.
Yeah, me too.
I knew my strengths and weaknesses, and now I can talk about them. But we all had our fears back then. But you build on your strengths, and that's what I continue to try to do, is just build on what I'm good at, build on what's centric to my world. That's why the podcast it boomerangs back to the band. The band ricochets back to the podcast, back to the songwriting, back to talking to people such as yourself, and going on other podcasts and doing interviews, and just spreading the word, man. It's in a lot of ways, I feel like, we were talking earlier about no internet and all that. And I feel like picking up the phone and talking to somebody the old analog way.
Yes.
And looking in their eye at a show and putting your hand out and asking what their name is and introducing yourself, that human connection will go farther than any digital form ever, in my opinion.
No doubt. And I think that's what not for me to sound like an old man right now, but I think maybe that generation, Gen Z, whatever it is, I think maybe they're lacking that. A handshake, a look in the eye. I think that skill goes a long way, in life, which, think about it. Me and you, we asked a girl to the prom. These days, kids, they do some kind of skywriting, and then a car shows up with a sign, and, there is no interaction like that anymore.
No, you all of a sudden are hogtied in the back of a Lincoln, and you're on your way to a prom.
That's right.
That's how you got there.
So all these years, you're in less than Jake. You just mentioned we're getting older, so the touring schedule is obviously going to kind of come down a little bit. You've got families, you've got kids now. is there other things that you do outside of music? Is outside the podcast, outside of the music business, any other gigs that you are a part of these days?
Only voluntary things. I mean, this isn't a gig, but excuse me, I belong to they call it Z-Fit where I'm at, but it's like CrossFit basically. So I do that 3 to 4 days a week when I'm off the road to stay in shape, and I love it. It keeps me focused, and otherwise I sit around and get fatter than I am. I was a Little League coach for my son's Little League team this past spring,
That's
which
a lot
was
of fun.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, my daughter is involved in dance. She's taking lyrical interpretation dance and hip hop this time.
Okay,
so we'll see how that goes. She's 7 years old, and she's just trying all kinds of things, and that keeps me keeps me running around. We got a couple dogs here. I got my home studio. I wish there was more hours in the day sometimes. Other days when I'm consumed and going crazy, I wish there was less days, and I'm sure you can relate to that sentiment.
Definitely. Well, I mean, I got to tell you, man, I think it's remarkable that, Less Than Jake has had this career. And this career back in I just want to say one thing, and my involvement in programming at the time is very little to none. But what we were doing at the station I worked at, 99X in Fort Myers, which was very close to you in Port Charlotte, even though you pretty much formed the band in Gainesville, I think we kind of took Less Than Jake. We kind of, made you a local band for us. We were like embrace you as a local band, but we didn't do enough. I wasn't involved, like I said at the time, but when you guys were doing it and you were big, I mean, it was like, Newfound Glory, and there were so many bands just like that in that scene before they like really blew up, and we should have really wrapped our arms around Less Than Jake and had a real, because I think the radio station kind of missed the mark on really embracing the band back in 98, 99, 2000, right at that sweet spot where things really blew up for that genre, Well,
thanks for saying that. I think, looking in the rearview mirror, I feel lucky, and I don't use that term like self-deprecating, but I feel lucky to not only have had a part in it, but to be remembered as a band that was floating in that scene. You got to remember, MTV commercial radio, you had about 10, 11 slots an hour. Yeah. Okay. The rest of it was filled commercials or whatever. And you were hearing the same stuff. It was the Chili Peppers into Soundgarden, into Green Day, into whatever it was. And you had your playlists, and there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. There still is. They used to call it payola, however you want to call it. There's politics. And I know a lot of bands that worked tremendously hard, had great songs that aren't even a blip on the radar. Right. So, I tend to look back as fondly as I can about those times, and I'm still lucky to be playing to people.
Any regrets?
I kind of touched on this a little bit with Mark Hoppus in the episode. I wish I would have stopped and smelled the roses back then a little bit. At the time, soaked in a little bit more, but I think that's impossible, right?
It is.
I don't know if I was capable of. I don't know if I'm capable of slowing down at 51 in my brain, let alone at 21.
Right. No, I think it is impossible. I mean, it sounds good right now, like, hey, take it all in. Take a minute to enjoy this experience. But, at 21 years old, you're, thinking about catching a buzz, maybe getting laid, and, surviving to the next town, perhaps. I don't know. But, yeah, I think it's impossible to do that. But if that's the only regret, man, I think success is, it's a success. The whole thing is a success, man, from start to finish.
That's how we look at it. I just got off the road 4 days ago. I played Nashville this past Saturday night, and, parents are bringing their kids out now, anywhere from 7 years old to teenage age to college age. They're coming out, they're having a night together. The band is, I don't know, necessarily commercially bigger than we were 25 years ago in the States, but business is better than ever. There's more people coming to see the band now than ever before, and I'll take it.
Absolutely. Well, I got to tell you, Chris, your time is valuable. I appreciate your time. Again, I think it's pretty funny that we're from around the same parts and kind of in the same biz a little bit. I'm way less creative, but really haven't had that conversation before today, and I'm really glad that we got a chance to do it, and I won't let you off the hook for maybe one day when you're bored and not doing anything, you can write me one of those catchy jingles. Man, I'd owe you forever. So
I love that, and thanks for the kind words, not only about the band and myself, but my father and that time period. You were one of the people that were fighting for us at that station, and we knew who our supporters were. So I really appreciate that, Jeff.
And again, your dad was such a cool guy, and I remember like it was yesterday meeting him at a few of the gigs, and he used to call our show, and so it was like kind of my connection to you was through your dad. So it was really great stories about him, and remembering him today was really, really good talking to you and learning more about your family, and they were good people. You said you grew up great. They worked hard for you. What kind of business? What did mom and dad do for business?
Yeah, so they both sang together. And they would do anything from Holiday Inn, the Holiday Inn bar nightclub gig, to weddings and birthday parties and corporate functions and graduations and retirement parties. So music was always in the house, and they would do that 2-3 nights a week, usually the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And during the day, my dad was in real estate.
Gotcha. So there was basically there was no, when you were deciding to go down this road and become a musician, mom and dad didn't talk you out of it. They were pretty supportive because they were living it.
Yeah, they were living it. I think that they knew if there was ever a time for me to do it, at least I wasn't 35, 40 years old. I was young, and I think they were as you would be, because the odds of making money in the music industry are it's tough. It's a tough business out there, very tough. And I don't think they were rooting against us. In fact, I know they weren't rooting against me or the band. But the odds of us doing what we did, they didn't see it. We didn't see it. But they were looking at the bigger picture, like we talked about earlier. What happens? What about tomorrow? And tomorrow to them was 5-10 years down the road, and all I could think about was, hey, they offered us free beer at the keg party tomorrow night. So they said they're going to pass the hat. Maybe we'll get another $20.
That's awesome,
we'll buy
man.
more beer.
Right on. Chris DeMakes a podcast. I'm going to tell you right now, if you're a fan of music, you got to check it out, because there's some incredible stories. And again, just really appreciate your time, and it was really great getting a chance to getting to know you a little bit after all these years. So thank you so much, Chris.
Yeah, thank you so much. And the next time I'm around, hit me up. I'd love to hang out.
I didn't quite realize this as we were chatting, but I think Chris was doing dishes during that interview. It's a pretty domestic kind of guy. I'm impressed. And if you want to go back to the Marlon Wayans episode, which is in the early parts of this podcast, like, I don't know, number 4, number 5, number 6, somewhere in there, I think he's working out during that entire episode. So not only in a band called Less Than Jake, still touring today, 30 some odd years later, and an upcoming European tour on Instagram at Less Than Jake for more details. So that sounds like his main gig still to this day, all the way back to his first gig at the China Fair in Port Charlotte. Thought that was probably one of the greatest first job stories that I've ever heard. And quite common for the job to not pay you during quote unquote training. I've been down that road before, but my dad never got pissed off to the fact of bringing me down to the job and telling the guy that runs the place to reach into the freaking cash register and pull out some cash. Can you imagine if that happened to you and you went back to work there like the next day? Yeah, I probably wouldn't have gone back either. So then Chris got a job a few hundred yards away at an Italian joint, washing dishes. You know, Chris also talked about having a songwriting job, you know, like his own business, where he was writing little jingles for businesses and songs for people who hated their boss. And I tried to get him to write one for the Celebrity Jobber podcast. I at least put it out there. We'll see if I can ever get that done. And, of course, his podcast, Chris DeMakes a Podcast. It's available on, all the platforms and on Instagram at Chris DeMakes, that's DeMakes, a podcast. Really cool guy. Was really excited to chat with him, get to know him a little bit as we've been kind of in this world, over the last 30 years and really didn't know each other. So I was glad I finally got the opportunity to do that today. Man, thank you so much for checking out this podcast, the Celebrity Jobber Podcast. Number 1, the Apple Podcast Music Interviews chart. You can follow on IG, celebrity_jobber_podcast, or you can go to youtube.com/the@celebrityjobber. It all started in Port Charlotte, Florida, but it really blew up in Gainesville, Rock City, when Chris was a student at UF. And if I told my dad when I was in college that I was going to start a band, he would have choked me. But since Chris's mom and dad were kind of in the business, musical people, and they did kind of gig on the side. So they were really supportive and they were like, hey man, go ahead, do it, follow your dreams. And at an early age, he did. And it worked out. He saw the world and is still doing it today. Thank you so much for checking out yet another episode of the Celebrity Jobber Podcast. Please subscribe. Would love a 5-star rating, and please leave a review. We're streaming on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, or wherever you listen to podcasts. So thank you once again, and until next week, I'll see you then. I'm Jeff Zito.